attorneys. I have attorneys. Sadly, I have so many attorneys you wouldn't even believe it.
How much of your, Mr. President, how much of your legal work was handled by Michael Cohen?
Well, as a percentage of my overall legal work, a tiny, tiny little fraction. But Michael would represent me on some things. He represents me, like with this crazy Stormy Daniels deal. He represented me, and, from what I see, he did absolutely nothing wrong.
That was this morning where President Trump on Fox and Friends made the admission for the very first time that, yes, Michael Cohen worked on his behalf with Stormy Daniels. Now, last month, just to remind you, this is what he had to say to the same question.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
I'm not an attorney, but that's pretty much a contradiction, and a whole lot has happened since then. Michael Cohen now says he will clam up and he'll plead the fifth. Cohen back in court today, where the judge appointed a former judge to review the documents seized from Cohen's home and office and hotel. She will be checking the files to see which ones will be turned over to prosecutors investigating Cohen. Now, during that raid, FBI agents seized 4 phones, an iPad, and a whole lot of paper documents. That could prove to be a treasure trove here of information, and it could present quite a problem for the commander-in-chief. Our own Dominic Carter, he was at the courthouse today, and he ran into, guess who? Michael Avenatti. He's the lawyer for Stormy Daniels.
The president contradicted his prior statements on Air Force One and the prior statements of that very same attorney relating to what happened here. This stinks. What's the bottom line here, Mr. Avenatti? The bottom line is that we appeared today in an effort to protect the integrity of the documents relating to my client. Yesterday, Michael Cohen pled the Fifth Amendment. It is an unbelievable moment in the history of our nation. It is the first time that a sitting president's personal attorney has pled the Fifth, only weeks after the president pointed the American people to that attorney to answer questions.
Well, here to help us walk through, the insanity, frankly, is former federal prosecutor Roland Riopelle. And Roland, you would have to try. You'd have to plot out in the morning, okay, well, how do I basically not only contradict myself, but put my own attorney where I'll marginalize his standing as an attorney, that he did so little work, and also acknowledge that all the tenets of my argument that I knew nothing were all fallacious because I did use them in that one particular case. To thread the needle of that kind of idiocy, you got to work at it.
Richard, you just couldn't even write a book like this. You just couldn't. This is the best show in American history, what's going on here. Mr. Trump's admission now that Michael Cohen did in fact represent him in connection with the Stormy Daniels affair is a very damaging one, of course, for Mr. Trump in the Stormy Daniels case and in terms of politics at large. But I just think Mr. Trump is not capable of thinking carefully about what comes out of his mouth. And if you lie constantly, you're never going to tell a straight story. That's what happened.
Roland, I wouldn't have taken, I wouldn't have even given odds because I thought there was no chance. When the Stormy Daniels thing first happened, the idea that potentially this has opened a door as significant, if not more so, than even the obstruction or collusion cases that Mueller's been working on, it's very possible this begat Cohen, this begat all Cohen's documents, and now all of a sudden, who knows what is being unearthed? And I now understand it's what's going through with the federal judge that has been applied to basically sort out what is or is not admissible.
Yeah. Now we're going to get into Trump's business dealings over the last 10 or 20 years, all of which Michael Cohen was right in the middle of. And as those documents are sorted out and looked through and combed over, it just seems like when a president wouldn't turn over his tax returns, you got to believe that those business records have got dynamite in them that is terrible for the president And the Southern District of New York, the premier prosecuting office in the nation for business crimes, is going to go through those with a fine-tooth comb. It's a very ugly situation.
Roland, explain to us, and Barbara Jones is the former federal judge who will be making some of the determinations.
I know her well.
So explain for us what the judge will be looking at and how she decides, okay, this is within the scope of the inquiry, this gets turned over to Team Trump, if you will. This the feds can use as they go forward in their investigation. How does that work?
Here's how it works. She will look through the documents that she now has, thousands of them, and she will make a careful judgment as to which documents are responsive to the search warrant. She will set those aside and deliver them to the United States Attorney's Office.
And finally, even with the recent pardon of Scooter Libby and now Jack Johnson that the president's talking about doing, interesting, the timing of this I don't think is coincidental. He's making it clear that he's got the pardon power, and anybody that doesn't play ball or that gets in trouble, he's ready to put his signature to let him out. But it doesn't exactly immunize in any way, shape, or form Mr. Cohen or any others, for example. Explain how the states could get involved in this and how it doesn't absolve somebody of perjury if they go ahead and testify untruthfully going forward.
Exactly. If there are criminal activities that are disclosed in Mr. Cohen's documents in connection with Mr. Trump's business activities, those crimes are almost certainly going to be chargeable as New York State crimes as well as federal crimes. The president's pardon power only extends to federal crimes. So pardoning Michael Cohen won't do Michael Cohen or really the president any good if those documents contain evidence of state crimes like larceny, the business type crimes that are chargeable in New York State. All of that evidence can be passed off to state prosecutors and they can pursue it. And then there's the problem that Michael Cohen would have with perjury, even if he's pardoned by Mr. Trump now. And let's assume at the same time Mr. Trump fires Mr. Mueller, he tries to sort of bomb the whole situation with the Trump atom bomb, the combined attack of a pardon and the firing of Mueller. If the evidence goes over to Eric Schneiderman's office at the Attorney General's office here in New York, they can subpoena Mr. Cohen to the grand jury. Once he steps through that door, he has immunity, and he must testify. And Mr. Schneiderman would have the thousands and millions, perhaps, of documents that were seized in the search warrant. And if Mr. Cohen lies about what's in the documents, he'll be chargeable with perjury at a minimum. And at that point, that's something that Mr. Trump cannot pardon him for. So it's unclear that a pardon does much here.
As we always say, Roland, until the next chapter of this insane reality show, I will see you then. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Good stuff.
Thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure. Yep.
All right, guys, coming up next, a budget hearing for the EPA doesn't sound like must-see TV, but trust me, when that EPA chief is Scott Pruitt, well, it's a lot different. Things got really interesting. Pruitt taking a beating from congressmen from both sides of the aisle. We got some of the highlights and commentary from ABC News political director Rick Klein.